Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a time, maybe not so different from ours, where even, everyday things like taking a bath or just playfully touching a friend could actually lead to setting up major rules for a whole community. That's where we're heading today. We're doing a deep dive into this collection of ancient texts. They're called the Pācittiya rules. And these aren't just like dry legal documents. They're more like snapshots of a real living community. They show you the human stories, the dilemmas that shaped early Buddhist monastic life.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is how these rules, which often came about because of some very specific incidents, sometimes quite dramatic ones, they really shine a light on these universal ideas, right? About self-discipline, community, harmony, respect. So our mission here is to look at the what of these rules, but maybe more importantly, the why behind them. We want to connect them to the bigger picture of, well, human behavior and give you a kind of shortcut to understanding these ancient insights.
Right. And we've got a stack of excerpts here, actual primary sources from the Pācittiya section of the Vinaya. That's the monastic rulebook, basically. Think of it like a historical record, maybe even an ancient reality show, capturing the challenges and solutions from way back then. So we're going to pull out the key nuggets for you, the really important bits of knowledge so you can get a real handle on this stuff.
Okay, let's jump right in. Some of these rules are pretty surprising. They really show how actions that seem totally innocent could have, well, serious repercussions.
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting because we actually see three distinct Pācittiya rules pop up from situations involving what you might just call play or, messing around.
Play, really, in a monastery. That sounds unexpected.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So take Pācittiya fourth ed. This one's about playing in water. The story goes that King Pasenadi of Kusala and his queen, Malika, they saw some monks, the group of 17, who were generally pretty disciplined playing in the Asuravati River.
What were they doing? Just, splashing, diving, floating around, having fun, basically. And the king was a bit taken aback. He said something like, "Look, these arahants, these respected monks, they're playing in the water."
Huh. And the queen.
She had a really insightful take. She said, well, either the Buddha hasn't made a rule about this yet, or maybe the monks just don't know any better.
Okay, so how did that become a rule then? Did the king go and tell on them?
No, much subtler. He gave the monks a lump of molasses gupitas to take back to the Buddha.
Molasses. Seriously?
Yeah, just a simple gift, but it basically forced the monks to explain why they were wet, what they'd been doing by the river. And when the Buddha heard, he laid down the rule.
That was it.
An offense for a monk to play in water above the ankles if the intention is to play. And they got specific to lesser offenses for playing below the ankles or in a boat or even just like hitting the water with your hand or playing with other liquids like gruel or milk in a cup.
Wow.
Yeah. Though, of course, they made exceptions for necessary stuff like having to cross a river or emergencies.
That's quite a story from just seeing monks splash around.
Yeah.
And a lump of molasses shows how carefully they observe behavior. But what about more direct messing around between monks?
Right. That brings us to Pācittiya. This one's about playful touching or hitting.
Mm-hmm.
And here we meet the, let's say, notoriously mischievous group of 6 monks, the Shabagiya Bik. They show up a lot in these stories.
Uh-oh. What did they do?
Well, they playfully hit another monk one from that disciplined group of 17 with their fingers. Just poke him, supposedly.
Okay, sounds like a prank.
It started that way, but it ended tragically. The monk who got poked became really distressed. He actually stopped breathing, and he died.
Oh my goodness, that's
Yeah.
awful, just from being poked.
It seems so, a truly shocking outcome. And it led to a very clear rule, an offense for an ordained monk to playfully touch another ordained monk body to body with the intention of making them laugh or teasing them.
I can absolutely see why.
And there were lesser offenses, too, for touching things attached to the body, like robes, or for doing the same to people who weren't ordained. It really hammers home that in a community focused on peace and mindfulness, even seemingly minor physical pranks could have devastating effects and just weren't acceptable.
Yeah, you definitely see the need for that boundary. What about deliberately trying to scare people? Was that also covered?
It was. Pācittiya LV, frightening monks. And guess who was involved again?
Let me guess. The group of 6.
You got it. The Chabagi monks.
Yeah.
They deliberately frightened some monks from the group of 17, apparently making them cry.
So what was the rule there?
Pretty straightforward. An offense for a monk to intentionally frighten another monk. And it covered a lot, not just physical threats, but things like showing scary sights, making scary sounds, even bad smells or tastes, or frightening touches.
Wow, comprehensive.
Yeah, and it also included talking about dangerous places to scare someone, like mentioning a bandit wilderness, or a place with wild animals, or even a ghost wilderness. The key thing was the intent to frighten. It didn't even matter if the other monk actually got scared or not.
That's interesting. It's about the intention, the disruption of peace, not just the outcome. It really shows how much they valued that inner calm, doesn't it?
Exactly. And connecting this to the bigger picture, you see, these rules weren't just set in stone. They evolved. They adapted based on real situations, on needs, on compassion. There's a real practical wisdom there.
Right. That makes sense. Like the rule about alcohol, for instance. That seems pretty fundamental now, but I bet there's a story behind how that came about.
Oh, there is, and it's a powerful one. Pācittiya, LAI, drinking alcohol. It involves a highly respected monk named Sagata. He was known for his spiritual achievements. He'd even supposedly subdued a powerful serpent spirit, a naga, through his meditation.
Okay, so a serious practitioner.
Very much so. But then, lay followers in a place called Kosambi offered him this drink, Kapurikapasana, which was intoxicating. And he drank it. He became completely unconscious. They found him just collapsed at the city gate. And the Buddha was clearly concerned. Here was Sagata, who was usually so respectful and powerful, now totally helpless, disrespectful. The question was asked, is something that makes you unconscious really suitable to drink?
A pretty direct
It
question.
was, and it led straight to the rule prohibiting the consumption of strong drink, sura, and liquor, maraya.
Were those terms defined? Like what counted?
Yes, quite specifically. Sura covered things like grain beers, flour beers, rice beers. Maraya was more like liquors made from flowers, fruits, honey, or molasses. And the rule is strict. Even a tiny amount, like a single drop on a blade of grass, was considered an offense.
Wow, no wiggle room there.
Not really. It shows a very early, very firm stance against intoxicants, and it wasn't just some abstract moral idea. It came directly from seeing its debilitating effects on a respected monk. It was practical.
That practical angle seems key. Did it apply to other basic things too? Like, say, building a fire. Seems essential, but maybe that needed rules too.
It certainly did. Pācittiya LVI, kindling fire. This came about because some monks, trying to stay warm in winter, built a big fire inside a hollow tree.
Uh-oh, that sounds risky.
It was. The heat drove out a black snake living in the tree, which terrified the monks and sent them scattering. So the first rule was pretty broad. No kindling fire or having someone else do it for you, just for warmth, unless you were sick.
Okay, but what if you were sick? Or just genuinely freezing?
Exactly the problem. Soon, sick monks started complaining they couldn't get warm. So the rule had to be adjusted. They amended it to allow sick monks to have a fire.
That makes sense.
And then they refined it further. They clarified you could have fire for other necessary things like lighting lamps or in bathhouses where fires were needed for heat. So the final rule was quite nuanced.
How did it end up?
It became an offense for an unwell monk to kindle fire just for warmth, unless it was for a specific valid reason, like being sick, needing a lamp, or using a bathhouse. It's a great example of balancing the ideal, maybe avoiding unnecessary comforts with practical human needs and safety. The rules were alive. They responded to reality.
That's a really clear case of adapting. So they were pragmatic about fire. What about personal habits, like bathing? Could that get out of hand?
Oh, definitely. And it did, which led to Pācittiya Eliopag about bathing too often. The trigger incident involved monks spending way too long bathing in a hot spring.
Enjoying themselves a bit too much.
Apparently. So much so that King Bimbisara had to wait for them for ages. He ended up getting locked out of the city gates overnight because it got so late. He showed up at the Buddha's place the next morning, still covered in ointment from his planned bath, and clearly not happy.
Huh. I can picture that. So what was the rule?
The initial rule was pretty strict. No bathing more than once every half month, basically once every 15 days.
15 days. Wow, that seems infrequent by today's standards. Did that actually stick?
Not really, no. They quickly realized it wasn't practical in all situations. So lots of exceptions got added. You could bathe more often during the hot season, for instance.
Okay, that makes sense.
Also, if you were sick, obviously. Or if you'd been doing physical work like sweeping. Or if you were traveling, you could bathe more during the journey or when you arrived. And even if you just got a bit dirty from wind and dust or slightly wet from rain, that was okay too.
So the actual rule ended up being?
It was an offense to bathe more often than every half month unless one of those specific conditions applied: hot weather, sickness, work, travel, getting dirty. It really shows how much context mattered. Appropriate conduct wasn't a single fixed thing. It depended on the circumstances.
Okay, these next rules seem to dig into the social fabric, right? Things like trust, respect, how people handle belongings within the community.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how seemingly small things like whose robe is whose or borrowing something could cause enough friction that they needed clear guidelines. Take Pācittiya elevating, not marking robes.
Marking robes, why?
Well, the story is that some monks were traveling with other wanderers and they all got robbed. Later, the royal guards recovered the stolen goods, but the monks couldn't actually identify which robes were theirs. They all looked too similar.
Oh, I can see how that would be a problem. People probably complained.
They did. It led to public complaints. So the rule was simple but effective. When you get a new robe, you have to mark it. They specified using one of 3 types of discoloration: blue, sort of mud color, or blackish green. Using a new robe without marking it became an offense.
It's like labeling your stuff. Basic accountability.
Exactly, like putting your name on your lunch in the office fridge, right? Just prevents confusion and potential arguments. Simple, practical.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
What about actually using someone else's things? Even if maybe you thought it was okay.
That's covered in Pācittiya LIX, using allocated robes without permission. And this time, the story involves a monk named Upanando Sakyaputto. He had formally allocated a robe to another monk who lived with his brother.
Okay.
But then Upanando went ahead and used that same robe himself without asking the monk he'd given it to. And the other monk wasn't happy about it, he complained.
So even if you gave it away, you couldn't just take it back temporarily.
Not without permission, no. The rule made it an offense for a monk to allocate certain types of robes to another monk, or a nun, or a novice, and then just use it themselves without getting the okay first, or without it being formally entrusted back to them.
So even in this community focused on non-attachment, clear communication about property and respecting ownership was really important.
Absolutely critical. They even had detailed procedures for how to formally allocate something, whether the recipient was there or not. It really underlines how important clear boundaries and respect for possessions, even shared ones, were for keeping the peace.
It seems like they were quite serious about property. What about just, messing with someone's stuff, like hiding it as a joke?
Yep, that got a rule too. A Pācittiya LX, hiding monks' belongings. And guess who's back?
Oh no, the group is 6 again.
The very same. They hid things belonging to the group of 17 monks. Their bowls, robes, needle cases, waistbands, specific items. And when the group of 17 asked for their stuff back, the group of 6 just laughed. The group of 17 ended up crying.
That's not funny, that's just mean.
Exactly. So the rule became, it's an offense for a monk to hide another monk's bowl, robe, sitting cloth, needle case, or waistband, or have someone else hide it, even if it's meant to be playful.
So the intent, like just joking, didn't matter as much as the impact.
Precisely. The impact was distress, so the action was forbidden. There were lesser offenses for hiding other items or things belonging to non-ordained people. And exceptions, of course, if you were just putting something away tidily for someone or holding on to it during a talk, that was fine. But the core idea, respect people's belongings, don't harass them, even if you think it's funny.
That draws a really important line, doesn't it? Between playfulness and causing actual upset.
Yeah.
Okay, one more area. What about just basic respect? Was there a rule for that?
There was. Pācittiya Elifi, simply titled Disrespect. This came about because of a monk named Chana, who apparently had a habit of acting disrespectfully, anakara akarati, as the text says. When other monks tried to correct him about his behavior, he just blew them off, ignored them.
So he wouldn't listen to feedback.
Basically, yes. Which led to the rule. Showing disrespect is an offense, and they actually defined 2 kinds.
Okay.
First, there's disrespect towards a person. That means ignoring instructions or advice from another ordained monk, thinking, what do they know, or their words don't matter. And second, there's disrespect towards the Dhamma, the teachings themselves. This means ignoring a teaching when it's being explained by an ordained monk, maybe thinking it's irrelevant or just not wanting to learn it.
So it's deeper than just being rude. It's about undermining the community structure and the teachings it's based on.
Exactly. It hits right at the foundation. That mutual respect for individuals and for the core principles is just crucial for any community like this, ancient or modern, to actually function and thrive. Without it, things really start to fall apart.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground here, gone through quite a journey with these ancient rules, from monks playing in water leading to regulations to playful pokes with tragic results and the really serious consequences of disrespect. These stories give such a fascinating look at the human side of building a spiritual community.
It really does. And it brings up a big question for us today, doesn't it? When we look at all these detailed rules, some of them quite surprising, what does it really tell us about the basic fundamental challenges of human behavior? How we live together in groups. How do these seemingly small actions, these little choices, still create big ripples today? And how do we in our own lives and communities manage that constant balancing act between our ideals and, well, practical human needs and safety?
That's a great point. Think about it for everyone listening. The communities you're part of, maybe your workplace, your family, a club, a team, how do you navigate these same issues? Personal conduct, sharing things, respecting each other. What are the unwritten rules you follow? Or maybe the explicit guidelines. And how do you think they came about? It's really something to chew on, isn't it? Especially seeing how these ancient communities wrestled with the very same things thousands of years ago.